Hi, everybody. Michaela O'Donnell here with the Max Dupree Center for Leadership here today to talk about purpose. So, if you've been following along for a little while, or this is your first time watching one of these videos, we organize our content by quarterly themes, and that plays out in a variety of ways. We've got newsletters and devotional series, and then we just kind of have these videos that help orient us to the theme. So, whether you're finding it while we're running this quarterly theme or after, this is an orientation to what we mean by purpose. Okay, purpose is a big thing, and we care a lot about purpose here at the Dupree Center. Our mission is to come alongside folks across industries and seasons of life as they seek to live and work in distinctively Christian ways, as they seek to respond to God's callings, right, for their life. And so purpose is big. It's right at the heart of what we do with all kinds of resources. So this is an interesting topic, or you're wondering more about your own purpose or God's purpose for your life, then I implore you to check out our website or get in touch with us to dig in deeper. So today I want to give some definitions, not to be overly rigid, but to try to untangle some things that I think often get conflated. So I'm going to give some definitions and then talk just a little bit about how purpose plays out across different stages of life and leadership, and then how we take steps toward purpose. So we're going to dig into it here. So first, definitions: purpose, calling, motivation, and gifts and talents. Purpose, motivation, purpose, calling, motivation, and gifts and talents. These are just sometimes things that kind of all get thrown into the same pot and swirled around. It's not necessarily bad, but I think if we're going to do a framing piece here, then it's helpful to untangle or parse some of that out. So first, let me give just a working definition. This is just when I look at a variety of scholars and theologians, and even our own work at Dupree Center. This is in the biblical text that we're drawing things from. This is what I'm offering. Purpose is the reason we all exist, and as Christians, the Max Dupree Center for Leadership is housed at Fuller Seminary. We have a strong Christian orientation to anything we do. We believe our purpose, individually, collectively, etc., is situated within God's purpose. Sometimes theologians, or maybe you've heard people talk about the image of God and the mission of God. The image of God, who is God? And the mission of God, what is God up to? And that what is God up to? What is God working to make happen? That's the purpose of God, right? So any sense of purpose that we have is situated within God's larger sense of purpose. So the reason we all exist, that's purpose. Calling then is God's invitation, God's summoning, God's pulling, drawing, this active thing where God says, "Hey, y'all, I want you to be part of this mission, this purpose." A couple of Bible verses that we use, and we have a couple of New Testament scholars, biblical scholars on our team here. And so Mark Roberts, who does a lot with purpose in the third of life and writes our Life for Leaders daily devotion, he offers these two biblical verses as framing that I think are really, really good to get at this relationship between purpose and calling. So Second Timothy, I'm just going to read them. I'm not going to unpack their context right now, but just going to read them. 2 Timothy 1, verse 8 and 9. Do not be ashamed then of the testimony about our Lord or of me, his prisoner, but join with me in suffering for the gospel, relying on the power of God. Here it comes. Who saved us and called us, right? Oh, these active words, with a holy calling, not according to our works, but according to his own purpose and grace. So we are called toward works that fit in the purpose of God, which is marked by grace and goodness. Romans 8:28, we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Again, calling being that active word, purpose being sort of the goal, the main point. We have given you high level overview. We have a lot more on calling. I wrote a whole book on calling called Make Work Matter. We have devotional series on calling in different stages of life. We have we'll list some resources. There's many pieces. What I just gave you there as definitions is just meant to be a launching point. So then the word motivation, this is a word that's come up a lot in work circles, primarily. Um, there's a variety of assessments that help figure out what drive people. So if purpose is the point and calling is God's summons into it, then we are all made actually kind of uniquely. What drives us toward our fullest participation in that? And so the definition that I provided here is what uniquely drives us as people. One of my favorite tests introduced to me by my friend Lisa Slayton is SIMA, SIMA, and the more popular version of it is M Code, which just gets at motivated abilities. And I find it a very helpful tool for life and leadership in being able to think about how we show up to work and how we respond to God's callings and how we participate in the purposes and the purpose of God in the world. Um, okay, so and then finally, gifts and talents. This is how we're uniquely formed. Okay, so we're uniquely formed. We have different skills, lots of different abilities, whether you frame that in biblical terms or in professional capacities. I think that's pretty open, and I think both of those are good for different reasons. But it just kind of, once you put all those together, so purpose is like the whole point, right? So sometimes people say, what's my purpose? Well, your purpose is to be part of what God's up to in the world. People say, what's my calling? Well, you're called to belong to God and then to show up participating in God's mission of redemption creatively with in whatever particular space God has you. Um, okay, how then do I best do that? Well, by thinking about our own motivation and capacities and gifts and talents. Of course, context, socioeconomic context, family of origin, geography, like what country were you born in? All of that, the economic systems that are at play, in the layers of that, all that factor into how purpose, calling, motivation, gifts, and talents intersect with work. And that would be a much larger video, but let me just acknowledge that here today. So, what I want to say here is that I'm going to go back to purpose now. Okay. So, purpose is the point, the whole point. Here at the Dupree Center, we recognize that questions of purpose and even questions of calling present in different ways in different seasons of life. So we talk about the first third, second third, and third of life in leadership. And in the first third, the questions kind of come up just like what I mentioned. What is my purpose? Do I uniquely have a purpose? How is that different from the person next to me? And how do those all make sense within God's mission in the world? And sometimes what we're actually asking is, what are my gifts and talents? What motivates me? And then that helps us describe how we'll respond to God's callings and participate in God's mission of redemption, restoration. So in the first third, sometimes it's what's my purpose? What is God calling me to? A lot of questions that we get are about who else is with me on the journey, right? Do I have a mentor? What about what's going on in my family? So just different questions of purpose. So, and I'm generalizing here, but in the second third, as responsibilities build, we hear a lot of people wanting to reconnect with their sense of purpose, reconnect with God's sense of purpose, and even with a sense of calling. Maybe they feel a little burnt out or um, tired, or just they all of a sudden got down a track that they're like, how did I get here? Or maybe life didn't give them so many choices, right? And so in the second third, we just get kind of some untangling and parsing out. And then very uniquely in the third, we get questions around what does purpose look like in this unique season? Maybe I'm nearing the end of, you know, 40-hour-a-week job. Maybe I'm going to take on a whole new career. Maybe I am going to spend time with my grandkids. Maybe I'm going to do a little bit of everything, which is more and more common in the third. But these questions of what does it mean to rediscover God's sense of purpose in the third of life, and then to come at that with fresh eyes as somebody who's not asking what's my purpose for the very first time. At Dupree Center, we have a number of resources that help people engage this. And one of the biggest reasons we have a number of resources is because it's not a simple process to either ask, what are my gifts and talents? What motivates me to show up in a work or otherwise content? How has God called me specifically, or all of us? And what are the purposes of God, and how do I fit into that? Those are complex, complicated questions. Um, Mark gives an image of Mount Kilimanjaro, saying it's one of those mountains where there's many paths to the top. And that's, we find that to be very real for people. We run a road ahead cohort, which is all about discernment, and just we watch people take, like, the picture on the front of our workbook is windy roads, because we just have learned over time that there's not a neat and tidy recipe. We have friends of the Dupree Center have written amazing books. I'm thinking about Designing Your Life, The Purpose Path. I'm even thinking about some of the work that our colleague Pam King does on purpose as a part of spiritual health. And we would just say, yeah, actually, we want to set a table where all those things are available. And you get to say what actually is helpful for me as I'm more deeply connecting with my sense of purpose. Um, so, to recap, purpose is the reason we all exist. This is God's good and beautiful and grace filled work in the world. If you're thinking about words like peace or shalom, grace, any of those things that you kind of imagine as the final picture of what God does in a picture of redemption, restoration, I would say, yeah, like that, like picture those things. I mean, that's going to be shaped by our different traditions and how we input the story of God into our own world, and what kind of dialogue partners we have. So I want us to be spacious there and not too prescriptive. And if you're feeling like, oh, purpose and calling have always felt kind of like the same thing to me, or I'm not really known how to distinguish those. Again, purpose, the whole point, the main reason, calling, God's invitation or pulling or inviting us into that sense of God's purpose, and how we're uh, activated in that has usually a lot to do with our context, but also our motivation and our gifts and talents. So, okay, that's an overview on purpose, especially as it relates to some other things. I just want to specifically highlight that we have a lot of materials that will point you toward, but we have a whole class for purpose in the third of life. Why do we have purpose in third and not second, third, and first third? Quite honestly, we just saw this as a gap, an area that where there had been not enough material in the wider uh, field or market. And so if that is a demographic that you are near, approaching, or in, or even if you're not, there's just some helpful things that might help you get a sense of the future. We invite you to check that out. Okay,